Testing, testing. I don't have a gavel, so we'll just have to take your seats at your leisure, things like that, right? No rush, no rush. We're all friends here. We have a packed house today. It's nice to see you all. You're all looking very well. A lot of heavy hitters and folks from the English division and people I know well, and some that I only know tangentially, but one way or the other. We got lots to talk about today, don't we? So today there, folks, we are taking in a lot of wonderful art that we have on the walls, right? And it's a fantastic event in that we've got, a lot to look at around us that is completely relevant, right? And a lot of folks have been in and out of the gallery. And a lot of folks have looked at the minute details of both the poems and the images, all of which we can take in as we're learning about them too. So today is different in that I am introducing two people rather than one, as we have for most of our events. And I like that we are talking about art that is kind of in conversation, right? We're not just talking about the photographer. We're not just talking about the poet. We're talking about the artwork, the visual art, and the linguistic art as it comes together, right? We use the word ekphrosis for that. We see the things that are kind of in the middle. We see things evolve. We see things in conversation. We have a kind of art of the aporia. We have an art of synthesis and a knowledge of ideas and things like that. And as humble artists, I thought that they would be okay with me kind of introducing the topic for those that don't know it all that well already. So today the subject matter is thin places, which is good for both a concept on its own and good for the spooky season, I think, right? So to introduce us to the basics of thin places, my research led me to Celtic mythology, where we find that thin places are locations where the veil between the mortal world and the spiritual world are permeable, allowing for closer contact between humans and the divine or the supernatural. These places can be natural features like mountains and rivers, or specific sites like ancient monuments, and were believed to be where the boundary between heaven and earth is the shortest, sometimes called a place where heaven and earth are meant to touch one another. So we'll hear a lot about that from both Kathy and MaryEllen. But short introductions about each of our artists today. Kathy McCoy, many of you know her already, so we don't need an introduction, but to reiterate some things, Kathy is a poet, a well-loved professor, and a former director of the Writers Project. She was a poet in residence at the Enumcar Writers and Artists Retreat in County Cork, the Moth Writers and Artists Retreat in County Cavan, and Dorset Colony in Vermont, as well as a reviewer at the Oxford Roundtable. And if I mispronounce anything, you'll have to forgive me, right? She has volunteered with the Tuscarora Indian Nation and the Adirondack Association of American Baptist Churches. Her books include Green and Burning, More Than Words, and Ringing the Changes. MaryEllen, who is a little tougher to find information on for me, is the founder of the Thin Places Project, an effort to document places where people experience the presence of the spiritual. Since graduating from Pratt Institute over 30 years ago, MaryEllen has been exploring various photographic processes. Her passion is late 19th and early 20th century large format photography, and she has been experimenting with printing her landscapes, botanicals, and portraits using alternative methods combining both old and new technologies, combinations of all sorts of things today, right, guys? So without much more of me, I think we agreed that Mary Ellen could speak first, and then we could get to the words that we've got around us as well. Mary Ellen Hendricks.
The opportunity. So probably about 12 years ago, I was at a beach service, and the minister there had just gotten back from a sabbatical to Iona, Scotland. He was there for 3 months, and he was talking about thin places. I had never heard of thin places before, and when I heard about the Celtic proverb that in any given place, the distance between the spiritual and the physical is about 3 feet, but in thin places, it's tissue thin. I just thought, wow, that's really cool. And also, I realized that I love photographing landscapes, and I've been doing photography for a really long time. I do really love using, I've used a lot of antique lenses and large format cameras. And I loved capturing the ethereal, kind of the other, in the particular place. So I started talking to my friends about thin places, and they would have one of two reactions. They'd either say, wow, it's really cool, or I have a thin place. So what I started doing then, my project became documenting my friends and other acquaintances' thin places. I would interview them, and then they would take me to their place where they found serenity and peace and solace. And I would photograph it and try to capture that special something. So I did that for a while, and I actually self-published a photography book recently. And in the book, I have the first part of the book are these thin place testimonials where I documented a photograph of their thin place and their story on the opposite page, which is interesting and kind of leads me to Kathleen as well. I'm veering off a little bit, but I think photography and words, I think they go together so naturally and so well. And well, I'll get to Kathleen in a minute. So after I did this for a while, I decided I really needed to go to Iona, Scotland, which is one of the original thin places. So in 2019, I went to Iona and I photographed there. Oh, actually, I'll point out a few pictures. Actually, that image over there against this wall here is Iona. So I went there and I just felt like I needed to experience one of the places where it all began. And that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. Right after that, the pandemic happened and lockdown. So I couldn't really meet with people, interview people, or travel. So what I decided to do is spend a year every single day photographing all around me, the neighborhood where I live, my house, all that. And that ended up being a really wonderful exercise as well. Like one of these, this is from Polaroid that actually was kind of was what it's a mistake, in other words. And I just kind of love the way the Polaroid, the chemistry made that shape there. But every day I would go out and photograph near my house. There's another one of that tree in autumn. And so while I was doing that, Kathleen found me online because she had just completed her sabbatical in a book of poems on thin places. And Kathleen sent me an email. She found my website with my Thin Places project. She sent me an email, and then we talked over Zoom and all that. And I bought her poetry books, and I loved her poetry. And when I decided to make this book, I really wanted to incorporate her poems with my photographs, because like my testimonials, I felt like her words really enhance the experience. So that's how it all came about. And I said I was going to talk about individual images. Let me see. This is a double exposure on a film camera. this is a tintype. It's a scan of a tintype and then printed on metal. Tintype is an old process from the 1900s that I played around with during the pandemic. I had so much time. Usually life is so busy and, my photography doesn't always come first. So it was really a wonderful opportunity for me to just do my work every day. So I got to play around with different processes like tintypes, double exposures. I did some cyanotypes, different methods. And I began printing on the silk panels because the whole idea of thin places and being tissue thin, I felt like the images and the prints had to reflect that idea. So printing on something very thin and ethereal and flowy is like a thin place. This is one of the testimonials, actually by my friend Sue, who has a thin place. Yeah, and then yes, I'm trying to. Some of these are not from that series. This is Australia. That happened after, and that's definitely a thin place. But yeah, it's been a really cool experience. I love hearing people's stories. I was that kid who would sit on the bus and a stranger would come up to me and start telling me their whole life story. So, and I've always loved that. So it was a nice way to incorporate the two things. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Any photography students here? Yes.
I hesitate to ask, but any overlap with psychedelics or the idea that everywhere in the world is the center of the world?
I mean, I haven't done psychedelics recently, but no, but I do think the thing I love too is that a lot of the beauty and the magic, it's all around you, and I think just seeing that and recognizing that, I think that enhances our everyday lives, and I think right now people are not feeling very hopeful. And I think it's really lovely to turn back to nature or whatever feeds you in that way. But I guess enhancing the experience probably works too. But
do you have favorite stories of other people's named places?
Yeah, I do have a few. I actually really love Sue's story. So I'll read that to you. And that's the marsh. It's in the town where Sue lives, and she passes by there all the time. One morning on my way to work, I was overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. Both of my kids were struggling, and the weight of it all was pressing hard on me. I hadn't been sleeping, relying on pills to get even a few hours of rest, and I felt like I was unraveling. Each day I passed the marsh on my way to work. It's always there, quiet and unassuming. But on this particular morning, I approached it, something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, I was filled with a deep, almost blinding joy. A sense of peace washed over me. It didn't make sense. I was still tangled and worried, still running through all the reasons to feel scared and overwhelmed, and yet a sudden calmness came over me. I remember thinking, okay, everything's going to be okay. I don't know where that feeling came from. It didn't come from my circumstances, and it certainly wasn't something I was trying to create, but it arrived right there at the start of the marsh. Now, every time I pass there, I remember the marsh hasn't changed. It's still there, beautiful, still, and eternal in its own quiet way. It reminds me that beneath all the chaos, something steady endures. Our spirit perhaps remains untouched. It is something in us that doesn't waver. That warning, for just a moment, I touched that place. Yes.
I'm a photographer. What I'm curious is if for the prep for lighting and things like that, when you were taking photographs of places, was your process consciously or unconsciously different than any other typical landscape shoot.
Yeah, it was. Well, sometimes if the person said they went there at a particular time of day, I would try to go at that time of day. So the light would be lower, however they were experiencing it. Yeah, sometimes I'd visit several times and make sure I really got it, what I felt expressed their feeling. So yes, yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Yes.
These are stunning, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I also have a question about your process and see so many layers within the thin spaces. And if you could talk a little bit more about, I'm not a photographer either, but I am an artist. I'm curious more about that combination of the new and old technology. Elaborate on that process.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, one of the things I love about these older processes is that you have to use a tripod and the exposures take time. It's like time for me to really look at it, wait until it looks like the right moment. What I do now, I develop, especially over the pandemic, I developed my own negatives, but what I would do is scan them and print them on my Epson printer. I have a dark room. I've done a lot of that. Partly the chemicals are so toxic, and so I don't do that often anymore, but I scan them and I print them. And then I play with them sometimes a little bit in Photoshop, most of like the double exposures and that kind of thing. I'm a little bit of a purist and I do it in the camera more. If I use Photoshop, it's like to lighten it or saturate it or a little bit like that. But yeah, so I take the old and use the new, and I feel like it's okay to not be a purist. So yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Any of the people you spoke with were all within places in nature? Was it ever another human being? Were there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there were, people where sometimes it was like their studio where they like to work, and yeah, so it varies, and I think everybody has, it's all valid. There was one woman who had actually been to Iona like decades before. And at that point I hadn't gone there, but she brought back this pottery from there. And that was her way of remembering it. So I photographed her pottery and documented her story that way. But yes, because I love photographing landscapes, I tended to kind of gravitate to that. But yeah, it's just, we all have them, places that make us feel, a connection, something more, and at peace. Yes.
So related to that, were they always positive experiences?
Yeah, they tended to be. Nobody really came up to me and told me about haunted houses.
I went to hell.
Yeah. Can you come? Yeah, not in my experience so far. But yeah, and I'm hoping that more people, that I get more of them kind of expand it. So yes.
Experience a sense of combination, something spiritually, or even just confirm in places.
That's a good question too. It's hard to say. When I see something in front of me that I really love and think is so beautiful, like I'll show you this one, I really get filled with a lot of joy and like a feeling of wonder. So like this woman, I worked with her and she said, oh, I have a thin place, and I went through this horrible year where I had cancer and I had to be in the hospital, like go once a month. And I have in my backyard, I have this really wonderful place where I can go and sit. And I call it my rock. And I just went there every day. It really helped me. And I was thinking, oh, her backyard, like, what's that gonna be? How am I gonna photograph that and make that look good? But I got there and it was so gorgeous because she had this like preserve on the, in her backyard, and this body of water and everything. And so when I got there and I saw it, I was just like, oh, so I do get that. I don't, that feeling of joy and excitement. I don't know if that's what you mean, but that's the closest I've come to it. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have one that will forever be like if you had a fire, the one thing you'd rescue?
Yeah, that one image, or I don't know, probably the image on the book, which is, from Isle Iona, probably that, because it just gives me that feeling. But it's hard. I have a lot, but yes, probably that one. And also I do love Sue's Marsh. That's a very special place. We've gone there many times. Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm guessing we'll have more questions, but in transitioning between forms of art and artists themselves, I think Kathy wanted me to acknowledge not only that you guys are my thin place, but that we are on something of a thin place as well, right? So Kathy wanted me to read a land acknowledgement to remember the history of where we are, right? And it runs thus. We acknowledge with gratitude and humility that we are gathered on the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, the original stewards of this land. We recognize the enduring connection that the Mohican people have to this territory, stretching from the Hudson River Valley to the Adirondacks. We acknowledge that the Iroquois Confederacy, which includes the Mohawk people who used the Adirondack region as hunting and fishing grounds and as a travel corridor. Finally, the Queensbury area has a documented connection to the Oneida Nation. The hamlet of Oneida in Queensbury was named for a storekeeper of partial Oneida descent in the early 1800s, reflecting the presence of the Haudenosaunee people in the area. We honor the ancestors, past and present, and recognize their ongoing presence in their homelands. With that, I do believe that Kathy McCoy can tell us a little bit more about thin places and the poetry that comes from them. Kathy.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see everybody here. And honestly, this has been kind of a dream for a long time to collaborate with an artist like MaryEllen. And I just am very grateful to MaryEllen Hendricks and Rebecca Pelcher, who were both very gracious in sharing their talents and inviting mine in. So I've got a couple of quotes that are epigrams for the epigraphs for the book of poems that this will become, that is in circulation and not yet published. The first one's from Al Einstein. That might sound familiar. And it's from a letter to the family of his late friend, Michel Besso, to console them about his own impending death. He said, "For us who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." And then this one's from Timothy George, who's a Southern theologian. I don't think I share his theology, but I loved what he said about thin places. Thin places are special, not because the air is rarefied or the land is narrow, but because the distance between heaven and earth shrinks and time and eternity embrace. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the Reverend Dr. Don Schuler. Put your hand up, please. who's guilty of introducing me to thin places in a series of sermons he gave that were just beautiful on bringing in Celtic spirituality and Celtic Christianity to enrich our experience of Christianity. But whether you're religious or not, I hope you'll get into some of these poems. The first one I'm going to read is not on the walls because when I started this project, it had a different direction and it veered a kind of 90 degrees like they do, right? Am I the only one who has this experience? I wanted to go to Ireland to study the bog mummies because I'm not into movies of the mummy or any of that stuff, but just started reading about bog mummies, which are mummies naturally mummified because they were most likely sacrificed in swamplands in the Neolithic era. And the bogs had such tannic acid in them that it turned their hair red and their skin to leather and preserved them for thousands of years. So this one is called Terza Rima for Cloney Cavan Man. And maybe later we can talk about why on earth would I use an Italian form for an Irish mummy. There was a little bit of logic to it, but I try to read it so that disappears. And the epigraph is County Meath, 392 to 201 BC, somewhere in there. He was found by peat cutters, the guys in Ireland who still take spades and cut up the earth and let it dry out and put it in the fireplace. And now on display at the National Museum of Ireland Archaeology in Dublin. What sight of him does, I cannot tell. It's as if I were his wife, companion Celt of little import, more his cur than half of a royal pair. There he lies, though I was sure that I could see him through the snare of cruel snarl bog that tanned his flesh, preserved his hair. Memories of a passionate hug dissolve like bones steeped in tannic acid in the fog of years, query like a hand hard carved rune beside his glass cell. Sorry. I can't leave the curl of his fiddlehead ear, nor drown myself like they did him, nor retrieve his chopped off hand. And had he cleaved to whatever he believed? In my country, too, history surely can label you, whole or partial, bury you, turn you to Roisin in prison. Roisin is a girl's name in Ireland, and it means rose, but it's also been an ancient metaphor for Ireland. They've anthropomorphized the country as an old woman that loves all her sons. This one is called Thin Places. And it's basically set in County Cavan, where I was at the Anamcara. Standing stones at Ardgroom seem not so massive, yet weighted with mist. For thousands of years, pilgrims have stood here to feel in the center of the rusty soul the tingle of recognition as all go in for the circle, breathe in time, breathe out. Stones sink in mud, drumlin, and cow stink, tall, blanched in thick mist, backlit by vernal light as nonplussed cows chew cud upon the rise. On my way down, I sink to my knees in muck and dung before I reach the planks. The cattle stare. I think they were laughing at me. On Tara's verdant hill, an obelisk, late added, marks where tribal kings claimed this land. St. Patrick will start his paschal fire here, where pagan Lu's great flame has always shown the way. Age to age, light to light. I stand amazed at how all this light, constant, many-hued, required nary a drop of blood. It's Saint Bridget, though, who lights the fire the nuns keep burning in Kildare, where oaks witness how the faithful and the faithless sing in harmony. At Newgrange, Newth, I forgot to introduce this, but you guys that don't know, these are Neolithic burial sites that are still well kept and still don't leak water after 5,000 years. At Newgrange, Newth, in streams, bogs, rivers, wet valleys, the sacrificed silver shines. Neolithic kings' bodies rise up from peat to tell their stories, still wearing their bracelets, but tanned by time and grow immortal. Once in sleep, I flew above a stone-built church, an ancient cemetery where silver bowls, butter urns, ornate candlesticks lay buried in the bog. Now, cabin winds batter doors and windows. Sky winks a big white eye, but darkens, releasing adamantine force on Earth's whipping catkins, its magnified, silhouetted thorns. After the bruising gale, branches bud. The ancient world remains vast, looped, and I have felt myself in two places and times at once. One of us wearing mourning clothes. M-O-U-R, mourning. Pete, you're gonna tell me how much time I have?
Sure. I have 112. Got 10 minutes or so, right?
Okay. All right, the next one is called The Sea of Cataclysm. And again, I have to thank Rebecca Pelcher because she brought in Alberto Rey's beautiful paintings. What was that, 1 year ago, 2 years? Yeah, okay. And I took my class in to write about them. And it was eco art. Is that fair to say? Is that a term? Okay. It was all about icebergs that are melting. And they were so vivid and so intense and told such a story that I thought I'd write about one of them. The Sea of Cataclysm. After the glacier paintings called Lost Beauty by Alberto Rey. Glacial images captured in darkness, in shades of malachite and teal. Seas of Earth's truest color emerge from the North Atlantic slowly. Ice boulders like henges, or islands of ribs, or ghost boats of bone, or scapulae piercing dark cavities, or final gasps of some extinct tetrapod whose mammoth spine twists, agonist of the deep. Underneath the surface, ice lines refracted, stippled by wind and moonlight. Ice mountains and universe converse, warm, crackle. A great jaw crumbles, uttering guttural sounds we've never heard before. Shores shudder. As ice, matter, watery antimatter float in the Sea of Cataclysm, we take the shallowest of breaths. Okay. This is where people came in. Answering that earlier question posed to MaryEllen. I've often said, well, I love Mary Oliver, but she doesn't seem to love people. And I love both nature and people, so I have to pull a few people in. This is called Molly of Dublin. It's just an invented name for a homeless woman I saw on the street in Dublin. In cool gray Dublin air, I stop when I see her gray eyes, gray sweatshirt under dappled skies as a magpie dives onto the pedestrian mall. The flash before a storm pours down. In a magic circle of her making, neat chalkboard messages in yellow, pink, green. Hello, I'm Molly, ready to work. Please, please help me. God bless you. Please help. She at last looks up to see me, trying to see past her cross-legged slump, blonde, messy bun, lines in her face, too deeply etched for one so young. Whatever pain I think I know crumples to the pavement at Molly's feet. On this broad avenue of posh stores, where trash is whisked away, where most hurry past, our eyes meet. I don't understand what they see. I bend to give a couple coins, but not my coat, not long conversation. I imagine the stones write prayers that Molly be safe, be seen. Neither of us belongs here. Still, I will return next winter, hoping to find on that clean swept spot no young lady, no one buried there under sightless glances. Thank you. And this is one more homeless guy on this beautiful bridge in Dublin. If you've ever been there, you've seen the ornate halfpenny bridge for the halfpenny that you used to have to pay to cross. It was like there were trolls there or something you had to pay to get across. So it's called Crossing Halfpenny Bridge. Arms pressed to my sides, I trek as if I were on the clock, though I am there to observe, speak, write on a still blue night, long after the sun has, among gold streamers, taken its bows. So the only light comes from the glass globes where pigeons perch upon rods of scrolled black iron. A young man passes crowds on the gentle arch of Halfpenny Bridge as young women tug at their toddlers, and I see something dark out of the corner of my vision. An ageless man curled in like a question mark into a dark overcoat sits at the bottom of the rise, cupping a coffee with fingerless gloves like that dark drink is his only light. As others dash by, erasing him, for a brief moment, I wish he weren't there. Uncertain I can see him without pity, without judgment, as a version of self, living in a dimension where I have lost everything, caught like a sprung coil between rusty cogs of time, where home is a city where street lights are blind and bed is a step on the rise of a bridge over the Liffey to nowhere. But here and now, in this dimension, on this bridge, where half a penny once was passage from home to work, hunger to bread, may question mark man become a comma, a measured pause, a way to slowly rise. Well, thank you so much. Do I have time for two more or no?
I'd say definitely do the two more, and then we'll do some questions. And I have a full class here, and usually they're pretty good at asking questions.
Okay.
Look at each and every one.
Awesome. That's always great. Okay. Well, I was going to read Trails of Tears, hence the t-shirt, about both an Irish and the well-known American Trails of Tears. On the road of frozen mountain passes to Delphi Lodge, without a pat nor any honor, like Catherine Dillon and her children, Pat and Honor, and others, as if what they need to consume consumes them. Irish grass, Quaker seeds they are afraid to plant in blighted earth. When workhouses fill up, those left begin to fall from fever, dysentery, smallpox, measles, scarlatina, then cholera, tuberculosis, typhus. The English export Irish wheat, oats, and more, as Charles Trevelyan responds, the judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson. 1 million bodies fell, not counting plagues on coffin ships. The Choctaw people remember expulsion from their gardens with Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, women yanked from their tents by white skins with strange tongues, children stolen, men driven like hogs to stockades. 1,000 miles for some by one of 4 routes, by land or river, through the Great Smokies, Ozarks, Appalachians. Jackson sneers at the 5 civilized tribes, orders them driven, quote, like brute animals. 1,000 miles to suffer or drop from starvation. Their dogs howl from the shore, jump into the river, swim towards them as far as they can. Rebecca Nugent tells of barefoot hikes in snow while the once shod eat their deerskin moccasins. Whooping cough, measles, dysentery, typhus, and more claim the natives. Even when the white men try to share their food, the pork, white flour, paucity of blankets and wagons sickened them. Yet when the Choctaw hear of the great famine across the long water to the east, they quickly summon, gather, sacrifice the Troy gold equivalent of 15 rand for their brothers and sisters across the sea to dry the tears from others' trails. So I was going to show you what a green man is. If you want to read the Green Women poem, that's a green man. They were pagan symbols of fertility and became syncretized into Christianity as symbols of rebirth. And you find them in medieval churches in Europe. And David Graham tells me he's even seen one in which park? Paul's Woods, right here. But it's pretty cool, the idea that there's a little man or a spirit staring at you when you're in the woods. For the sake of time, I'm skipping that poem. I just wanted to show you the visual. And I'm going to read a new poem, just because I don't want you to feel depressed about thin places. I really think they're very beautiful. But I chose poems that I felt went with the beautiful tenor of the photographs. So this one is called What Kind of Future, You Ask? What kind of future, you ask, would I will into being? And I catch my breath at thoughts of dark-boned apocalypse or rains of fire. That root rock tornado split our lovely maple into shards when all I wanted was an orchid under glass. This world vibrates intensely. The next will too. And then here's a line from David Bowie. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. I believe in filling black holes with our treasures, sending darkest memories to the abyss. I'm happy now, wherever future takes me, knowing these arteries don't end in this body. All Earth's lush muck attests that joy lurks everywhere. So I wish for a world where, when torrents descend, we catch each drop and poems form on the tips of our fingers like proverbs, like pearls. Thank you.
Brook Trails of Tears, it's kind of a two-part question. That was a reference to the Great Famine of March, right?
Yes,
Okay.
in the late 1850s, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I've heard of the story. Isn't there like a monument in Ireland for the Choctaw people for them having done this?
Yes, I've forgotten the name of the artist. I have a poem on that too. I didn't get to see it in person, but it certainly fit with my themes and the idea of thin places. But it's a giant, I get the impression that it's maybe 8 or 10 feet high, but it's a big circle of feathers curved toward the center, steel feathers. And it's in homage to the Choctaw who sent this saving money to Ireland so they could get food. Yeah.
Suppose I can start things too. Can you talk a little bit more about form and subject? So I'm not sure you filled in all there is to fill in about, I think it's the Tertsarima and the Irish Mummy, right? But I see a lot of poetic forms, and you know we have a lot of writers here, and I would say that you know more about poetic forms and fitting form to subject. So with some of the poems that we have here, how do we fit form with subject? And you mentioned it specifically in relation to, I think it was the Italian form of the Ritzarima, being a fog monk.
Yes.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I'm a little embarrassed to address it because I honestly don't know if it works. You know, sometimes poets are the worst arbiters of their own taste, but I was looking for a form that I hadn't tried before. Partly to
And can you
experience
explain the form and maybe
yeah.
the feel of the form, like what's associated with the form itself?
Yeah. I can't rattle, I probably should be able to, but I can't rattle off any famous poems that use Tertsarima, probably because I don't read Italian, but it's it's 3-line stanzas. The first and third lines rhyme. And then I also threw in some internal rhyme just because I got on a roll. But I think what I was going for was a little bit of strangeness. I'm very much into free verse poetry most of the time. And so to pull me and hopefully the reader out of the familiarity, I guess, of free verse, where you can just read it almost as easily as you could read prose, and then go back, of course, to find the patterns in the literary things. But I wanted that. There's sort of a rhythm that's a little different, and there is a propulsion down the page, and there is a striving for rhyming words that won't make one gag. In the first draft, I rhymed snog with fog, and everybody just went, oh. Fortunately, it was a draft workshop, so so that went away. But yeah, I mean, you have to be willing to fail and trip and, you know, make mistakes.
Do you have favorite forms, or in your own poetry classes, are there ones that you felt like worked well?
I don't let students try forms until after midterm because I want them to hone their own language in regular language first and get the sense of lines as entities and line breaks as conscious choices. But then when we do launch into form, we pretty much just get to things like sonnet and sestina. They'll try a villanelle. I love the villanelle, but it's a master's form. It's very hard to write repeating lines that have different nuance every time they come up. So you've got to have a lot of double entendre and, words that mean more than one thing or can serve as more than one part of speech. Like rose can be a color, it can be an adjective, it can be a noun, it can be a verb. You've got to find those kinds of words and moments and let the repetition carry the theme. Does that help?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, some of that can get lost with contemporary groups, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And students have an ear that's in training. So they like rhyme often, but it's getting them to continue the line, continue the syntax of the line, past the line break, and find new combinations and novelties in that. Yeah, Joanna?
So a lot of your, you were inspired by visuals, obviously the photography and maybe even just, nature itself, but especially with the first two poems you read, you talked a lot about scientific concepts. So can you speak a little bit about the research behind your poetry?
I've got them all mixed up now. Do you know which one you were thinking of?
The bog mummy one.
Okay, Cloning Cabin Man and Sea of Cataclysm. Okay. I really didn't need to do any research for Sea of Cataclysm. I just really did my own visual note or my own notes on the visual of that painting that drew my eye in so much and thought of all the things it looked like. It looked like bones. It looked like ribs. It looked like skeleton. And there are descriptions in Ray's book of, I guess when you're actually in the ocean near at a safe enough distance that you won't be swept under, but near enough to an iceberg or a glacier to hear it melting, it makes these horrible Halloween creaky noises. And so that made me think of bones and sound and all these warnings we're getting constantly that we're overwarming our planet. For Cloning Cabin Man, yeah, I did a lot of research into the bog mummies. The actual archaeology, I read a few of those, but there was a lot in the popular press in Ireland also, and in America about bog mummies. And I could read a variety of sources to see how the bog works and why are they coming up now? We're finding more bodies all the time because the planet's melting. And so everything we've hidden is coming out. So I thought that was a wonderful thing to write about. My students look at me for a while like I'm crazy, and then they kind of get it, that I am crazy. Does that help? Also, going to the Museum of Archaeology in Dublin was like, I had to see them. My husband was so kind because it was like, yes, dear, I want to go again. You want to come with me? He was like, no. Hi, Charlotte.
Are there any photographs here that particularly connect with your poetry?
Oh, they all do. I think they all do. I was invited to pick spots where to slide the poems in. So I, like the homeless lady, there isn't one that's literally connected to that. But in Wall of Clocks, they're not literal connections, but they all in some way touch on an emotion of receptivity and just that excitement you get when you feel like you could almost touch something that you can't see. I mean, I just go to these ancient places and I think, oh my golly, somebody was walking right here 5,000 years ago. What was it like for her, And in the museum, just looking at that mummy, what would it be like to be your wife? I'd be more like your dog, wouldn't I? Your cur. so yeah, I identify with a lot of these places. The big ones certainly too. The bridge, I love the bridge. I love the watery ones, and I just love the ethereal effect of her lighting in the woodsy ones. I just love them. They all speak to me. Yeah. Yeah, basically any place I can go and be alone for half an hour in nature is a thin place, you know? You pull out your memory or your camera or your notebook or all three and start taking notes because it's all talking to you. You just have to get quiet enough to hear it. I built into this book to be a bunch of poems about Ohio because I'm from Southern Ohio and ended up making a lot of trips as my father was going downhill. And we're right in the foothills of the Appalachians. And there's a lot of Bible Belt stuff there, a lot of very earthy people who give you the shirt off their backs to help you out, but with whom I would never agree politically, right? So there's this strange tension of, oh, this is home. Oh, I could never live here. And that kind of feeds the thin places for me too. So I found myself going back to the old barn where I used to hang out and feed the horses and muck the stalls and all that.
Can you talk a little bit about there's a book coalescing on the thin places for you, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and where it's going? What is in the future to be written, and stuff like that?
I have this manuscript and it's making the rounds. The chapbook version got a finalist for an award, but that and $5 will buy you a cup of coffee, right? It still doesn't get you published. This poem got a finalist from Writer's Digest, but again, it wasn't even published. So, so I'm in the long slog of coming after my father's death. So right now I'm writing poems about the good death. And, death is a thin place too, right? It's such a privilege to be in a space where somebody is dying who's totally cool with it, aside from the pain. And he would not take morphine. Don't recommend that, but even the Pope approves morphine. But anyway, yeah, there's good coming out of that too, I think. And they're different poems than I've ever written before. They're shorter and a little more surreal. Because he was a very rational. I was my mom, very up here. And he was very hands-on and working the land and running a power plant. But in his last 2 months, excuse me, he started literally seeing things. And he was just getting such a kick out of it. He would see cartoons scrolling across the wall. And he would say, don't tell my friends, they'll think I'm crazy. And I said, no, Dad, nobody who knows you will think you're crazy. Your brain's just having a fun time right now. So, but I think that's a thin place. I think it's the brain trying to make sense of things that don't make conscious sense. So those I think those will probably be a chapbook because I don't think I can write enough of them to do a full book.
Well, I think we owe Kathy and I
Hi, folks. I think we all had a good day and learned a good deal and have a lot to think about. Look forward to in 2 weeks an engagement with our own Neil Herr, who is with us today as well. And as I've found in most of these things, we can all mill about and grab some water and cookies and ask questions that we may have not had time for. And there are books to be sold, it sounds like, right? Books, books, books. Grab some books. Sign up for websites, grab books, all these kinds of wonderful things. And thanks for coming, guys. See you soon.